I can't do this. It's never going to happen. Why are the people around me, they're having success faster? What are they doing that I'm not? So instead of focusing on you, you start looking at all the uncontrollables that have nothing to do with you and they're not going to benefit your path. And you become consumed with things that cannot proceed you and where you want to go. It's that not knowing. I think that's, in my opinion, that's for me at least, that's been the key piece of this. And that's tough, but you have to, that's why we do these 90-day sprints or these planned timelines. At least we're giving ourselves some kind of boundary to work around and have some kind of reward that can go along with it.
Welcome back to Real Estate Junkies Coast to Coast. I am Rusty Ham on the West Coast. With me is Steve on the East Coast. What's up, Steve?
Well, man. Hey, Russell, I don't know what it's like with you over there, but it's starting to get warmer.
Yeah.
Kids are liking the walk. We're going to the park after this. We're going to run around with shorts on. Shorts alert.
You're going to go to the park?
I'm going to go down to the park with my kids and kick some balls around.
Awesome. Yeah, we've had some of those April showers here in the West Coast, but all good. This week, we're going to, remember the 3 pillars that we talk about on a weekly basis is mindset, skill set, and systems. Today, we're going to talk about the mindset and what I'm running across in our community. You're in the community and this can happen. This has happened to us. Talk a little bit about fatigue and that type of mindset, because this is not easy, right?
Yeah, I think your brain, when it comes to fatigue, is literally no different than your body, right? With your body, you do activities, you have this threshold and where your body can only handle so much. You get tired, you need to give yourself a break, right? Same thing with your brain. And I think a big piece of the mental fatigue, it shows that you care. That's a bit, if you didn't care, then you would just, whatever, you just keep going or you just quit. With real estate, especially when you're building a new business, which we see in the community, of course, is you come in like, all right, I'm starting real estate. I'm super, super excited. Real estate's super sexy. I've seen how everybody who becomes rich and they're able to change their life, real estate is the place to be. And they're not wrong. But for some reason, that excitement when you have to actually do the work and you realize that this is just like any other work you do and you have to put in tons of time, be consistent, everything, eventually that like allure starts to wear off and you're in it. And what we talk about is 90-day sprints. And it's the whole point of the 90-day sprints is to be able to have something to sprint towards, have certain goals in that timeline to sprint towards. And then you should have some kind of way to what's the word, Russell? Give yourself a reward, some kind of reward at the end.
Right.
Where you feel like you know that you had these goals that you're reaching and you're going towards something. Instead, what some people do in the beginning of a business, they don't understand how important it is to compile metrics or KPIs, key performance indicators, how many dollars you're making, this, that, all these numbers tell you if you're progressing, if you're not, where you need more work to get better, all that stuff. So I think it's just important to know that when you're doing something difficult that is repetitious, it's new, you have to give yourself grace. This is not supposed to be easy. Anything you're learning, whether you're playing baseball, you're learning how to do plumbing, you're learning anything, right. You're a teacher, like it's going to be difficult and you're not going to have confidence until you've done it enough where now you're confident and it's not difficult for you anymore. And it's very easy for you to just hit these walls and just be like, I have been working my butt off for 90 days. I don't have a deal, but I did get better at these things. The problem is but I did get better at these things. People don't notice that. They just look at that. They didn't make any money, right? And that could be what their version of success is. So Russell, touch on that a little bit, maybe for yourself. It's draining, right?
It's draining, yeah. Yeah, I'm feeling it, right? I'm feeling part of some of the people in the community, they're just not, that mentally, they're just not there anymore, right? There is a honeymoon stage when you first get into real estate and, real estate on your terms, like how we buy. They're excited. Oh, we can buy these homes with no money down. And we're going to take over these properties and we're going to put a rental buyer in there. We're going to make payday one and we're going to make all this money. And then it's not happening. And we talked about it, the gap in the gain, right? So what they focus on a lot of times is what they're not achieving or what they're not getting, which is a deal under contract. So that they're focusing on that instead of what you just talked about, which is all the gains that they made up until now. So it took me a year to get my first deal. We're going to talk about the deal in the cool down section. But it took me a whole year. Within that year, I could just give up, 100%. But I just kept dialing. I did something on the business every day. And so that I understand what they're going through, because I went through it, and I think you went through it too as well. It took a while to get your first deal. And we're going to talk about when a deal possibly goes sour.
Yeah.
And what do you do with that? Because again, if it was easy, everyone says this. If this is easy, everyone would be doing it, right?
Too, Russell. And I think that everybody in the world would be incredibly successful and they would be wealthy if they knew exactly the timeline in which they would be successful. They would be financially where they want to be. They'd be like, somebody said, hey, it's going to take you 7 years, 3 months, and 13 days if you stay consistent. Guess what? No matter how much that person hated it, they would show up every day because they're like, there's something at the end of the tunnel. It's that not knowing that I think drives people insane. It's that not knowing that causes fatigue earlier than actually their brain can handle. It's that not knowing that says, what does David Goggins say? Excuse my language, but he calls it his inner bitch, right?
Yeah, bitch voice.
And if we just knew when things would happen, we would be able to be level-headed. But that uncertainty causes your brain to start saying crazy things. I can't do this. It's never going to happen. Why are the people around me, they're having success faster? What are they doing that I'm not? So instead of focusing on you, you start looking at all the uncontrollables that have nothing to do with you and they're not going to benefit your path. And you become consumed with things that cannot proceed you and where you want to go. It's that not knowing. I think that's, in my opinion, that's, for me at least, that's been the key piece of this. And that's tough, but you have to, that's why we do these 90-day sprints or these planned timelines. At least we're giving ourselves some kind of boundary to work around and have some kind of reward that can go along with it.
Yeah. And instead of looking at what you don't have, look backwards, right? Look backwards and look at what you've accomplished. Like from day one, picture yourself on that first phone call. We're sweating our butts off. I had these rings of sweat underneath my arms and I was just deathly afraid. Now I just get on the phone and it's just like talking to my neighbor, right? It's just totally natural. So it's easy for us to say, just stick with it and keep pushing through and it's going to happen. But if they don't have proof of concept, if they don't have a deal in hand, I can see how someone might just say, you know what, this is not working. And I'm out here. And we've seen that multiple times in the community.
I think real estate's for savages, in my opinion. From what me and you have seen, all the people who become successful in real estate, these are the ones that no matter what their doubts were, no matter like anything that they told themselves, it was always outweighed by what was this thing, that goal, that why was always stronger than the doubts, the negativity, when is this going to happen? That's why we always talk about how important it is to have a why. Are you doing this for yourself? Are you doing this for your kids? Is it something to do with your family line of entrepreneurs? Does it have to do with providing homes for people that you've been in their position before and no one was there to help you, right? Mm-hmm. There could be a million reasons why, but you got to get really connected with that thing. It's because when things get dark, and it's difficult, it's that thing that means so much to you that will continue to push you. So that's why we talk about the why a lot as well. You got to know why you're doing this. What does this provide you?
Right.
And it's funny, and you know this, Russell, because we've done this over and over again. When it comes specifically to the why, so what I've always noticed is most people don't do it for themselves because they feel selfish doing it for themselves. So you hear, oh, I'm doing it for my wife. I'm doing it for my kids. I want my mom to be able to retire, my parents, or this, that. It's so funny how everyone is hesitant to do it for themselves. And I started having traction when I released all these other people that I was trying to, they're going to be a part of it anyways. Right? But you got to figure out why it means to you. And if you don't know why this is important to you, it's going to expose itself eventually.
Yeah.
People, I think.
Yep. No, good point. I appreciate that. Let's pivot to our game plan today. Our game plan is we're going to revisit a lease purchase and to explain, Steve, a typical lease purchase. I believe we're it's usually in the 36 months. A lot of times in terms, we want the longer the term, the more money we're going to make, right? For us as a investor. But there's times where we need to keep that term under a certain time frame. So explain why some lease purchases on average would be less than 36 months.
Yeah. And I should disclose, and you can tell by my chain, my hat, and my hoodie that I am not a CPA. And I never will be.
That's right. Yeah. So I as well, I'm not a CPA.
But as we see it, as we say with the air quotes, when it comes to capital gains, right? So let's say I own a home. I'm a homeowner. I've been living in my house for years or at least over, 2 years? Over 2? Okay. So when you live in a house for over 2 years, you have 3 years, Russell, to sell it without having to pay your capital gains. So we'll set up terms sometimes with sellers that are 36 months for a reason. And the reason why is we want to cash them out before that 3-year threshold so that they don't have to pay capital gains. So for example, anybody who's lost right now, when I bought my first home, I bought it for $125,000. Okay. I put a bunch of work into it and then I ended up selling it like 2 years and 3 months later. Now, I ended up selling this house for $250,000. So I made $125,000 on it. So because I lived in this home for 2 years before I sold it, the gains weren't taxable. There was $125,000 I did not have to pay gains on. So sellers that we buy from who are doing creative things where the house is not coming out of their name, they want the same thing. They want this to be cashed out in a certain timeline so that they don't have to pay taxes on whatever gains that they have, that extra equity now that they have in the house from living in it. So that's what we do is we protect it by using these timelines that will work with them. And we won't go in the weeds here, but what's nice is let's say we're getting close to that 36 months and we don't know if we're going to make that timeline. It doesn't mean that we can't still protect that person's gain. All we have to do is change title before that 3 years, and that actually stops the clock for them because it actually acts as a sale. Even though the mortgage stays in place and still paying down, deed transferring to us counts as a sale, stops the clock. So as long as we transfer that deed before 36 months, that protects the seller to having to have to pay capital gains. Hopefully that was digestible and it didn't sound crazy.
Yeah. So there's a couple of capital gains. There's short term, right, where you do a fix a flip. There's gonna be a taxable event on that because you didn't live in it. You just fixed it up and sold it right away. So there's gonna be a quick hit on that. And then there's long term capital gains, meaning anything over 3 years. If you haven't lived in your home for 3 years, hypothetically, you're renting it out. That's typically what happens. If you're over 3 years, you're probably renting that property out. Then you're going to get hit again as a long-term capital gains investment property. Again, we're not CPAs. You can take our word for it or not. If you're unsure, then check out with your CPA or whoever you go with as far as your finances and ask questions about that. But this is how we've maintained using a lease purchase. Because lease purchase, again, we're agreeing on a price. We're agreeing on a length of term. Typically, it's going to be on or before 36 months. We're going to agree on the equity piece that the seller has, right? We're going to protect it. And then on or before 36 months, we're going to cut you a check for that. Let's use you for an example. We're going to cut you a check for $125,000 and then pay off the remaining balance of the loan. So again, check with your CPA. But this is how it happened. This is how we can keep you from paying more in taxes. Again, transferring title, it's going to be a subject to now. I think that's what you're alluding to. When you transfer the title to our company, it stops the clock. That's how we call it. We call it stopping the clock. Mm-hmm. And it turns into a subject to the existing loan. We're buying the property subject to the existing loan. The loan's going to remain in the seller's name. We're just going to continue to make those payments directly to the mortgage company, and the title will transfer to us, stopping the clock so that the seller does not have to pay that capital gains. Awesome stuff, Steve. Thank you so much. So let's go down to our cool down. And I think you wanted me to talk about, take a deep breath. I think you wanted me to talk about my first deal. Again, we talked about at the very beginning with mindset. It's not all roses, right? You're going to go through bumps and bruises. Like your first deal, you said was an AO, which I think we've talked about, which was what in the sign out. We have in the sign out, and you had to give, and how much was that house?
Yeah. So that was my first taken is short for taken under contract.
Yeah.
I had this house for 2 weeks marketing to find a buyer. Now, I called this gentleman on the phone. I remember this specifically. This is a funny story. You've never heard this story. This house is in a very high-end area in Massachusetts. I forget, started with an S. I forget the area. I wish I remembered it because it's the most Massachusetts sounding area and I'd have a really great accent for it. Maybe I'll grab it eventually in my brain here. But so I call this guy.
Was it Worcester?
It probably ended in Chester. So I call this guy. He's got the heaviest Russian accent. It's hard to understand. And the guy is just like stone cold. Like every question I asked him, yes, no, yes, no. Like it was really difficult to really communicate with him. So the first time I talked to him, it was like the guy said yes to everything. I'm like, this is weird. Usually people who say yes to everything I'm saying are telling me that they probably don't understand what I mean. We had no questions. I'm like, this is odd. So he ends up going cold for a month. And then I end up getting him back on the phone and he tells me to come down and bring the contract. So the way that we were setting this up with what Russell said, an assignment is basically what it is that we are setting up a lease to own for a seller. So we're going to set up a monthly payment for them. We're going to have a timeline for them and a cash out date. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to find this buyer. We're going to pre-vet them, make sure they can afford the home and they're a fit for the home. And once they are, we put the finished package in front of the owner who says, yes, Steve, yes, Russell, after looking at this package, I agree. This is a person I want to buy my house. I feel comfortable with them. And then we close. And the way it works is the buyer of the home that we both accepted brings in a non-refundable down payment. And typically what happens with that non-refundable down payment is the seller and us as the investor split portions of it, whatever it is, whether it's 50-50, 80% to us, 20% to them. We just get paid by bridging this relationship together, finding them, pre-vetting them, make sure they're a fit, and then set this like rock solid investment for this seller to be able to cash flow their home and inevitably sell it rent to own to this end buyer. So I go to the house. I had my coach calling because I was so nervous. I was 100% when I got there and started like looking at how this guy was moving, and he had a guy with him. Like, this dude's in the Russian mafia. 100%. He had leather pants on. He had a leather jacket on. He was just like, he looked like he was in the movies. I was just like, I don't like being here by myself. Either way. So I get the agreement out. Chris is on the phone. He walks him through the agreement, gets the guy to sign. I'm terrified. I think I'm going to be in the ground later on or something. With my body. It was just a sketchy feeling. It was a nice house. It was a rental for years. And he signs it. I'm like, oh my God, I just got my first taken. This is amazing.
Yeah.
The contract back. I call Chris. I'm like, awesome. All excited. So 2 weeks. So I start marketing the house. So Chris gets us all set up and Nick, and we get our property on the market. People start calling. The first person we send to the house, we put a lockbox on the house. Person rolls up to the house, walks into the driveway, gets to the door, starts getting the keys in the lockbox, goes to open the door, and someone pulls up to the house. And it is a husband and a wife with groceries in their hands.
Oh, no.
And they're like, what's going on? And we came to visit the house. We were looking to buy it. They're like, we've been living in this house for 2 weeks. It was rented to us.
Oh,
this
no.
guy signed this contract and then immediately rented it. And then I call him, like, I think his name was Vladimir. It was like the most Russian name you've ever heard. And I'm like, what's going on, man? You got people living in your house. I decided I'm going to rent it. I am crushed.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, I've had this house for 2 weeks. I have tons of activity. It's $1 million house. There's a potential for $80,000 to $90,000 first deal. Just carrying in my hands. I'm counting money that's not there. I'm at home with my little green polka hat going. And I'm like,
yeah.
And I decided not to do it. I'm like, so that was like 6 months into me starting. Right. So I was like, I remember like month 5.5, I'm like, man, I'm showing up. I'm making my calls. I'm learning. I'm getting on the phone. Nothing's happening. Then I get a contract and I'm like, oh, everything I did worked. I had the wrong expectation. I just needed to give myself time to learn.
Yeah.
And then I get this contract. I'm like on the cloud 9. And then I find out I lost the contract and I'm like, that punch in the stomach. But I had to pick myself back up. Wasn't happy about it. And it took me another 4 months before I got my next property under contract. But that 4 months was rough because now, even though I kept pushing, what do I start telling myself? Next house I'm going to get under contract, I'm not going to sell again.
Yep. Wow.
So that's why like the mental piece of real estate, like you can choose the journey. If it's going to be great for you, it's going to be fun. It's going to be stressful. You're going to be anxious. It's a matter of, you got to be able to just dust stuff off and you got to be able to move forward with the right mentality. Because if you don't, this energy you're putting out, you're going to get back somehow.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Crazy. So yeah, my first deal, it's a complete opposite. It was not a Russian mafia guy. It was actually a guy and his husband. So it was a gay couple in an area that, if you guys don't know about Southern California, Palm Springs, it's a lot of gay people live there, which is fine. That's how that's their life, right? So they were awesome. They were cool. I went to the appointment. Mike McCready's called while I was there, right? Talked to him, my coach, yep. And he answered their questions. They had a super low, and so they wanted this to be their retirement, right? They had a ton of equity. They had a really low payment, like a $900 payment on an $800,000 home. So we were going to give them, on top of their mortgage payment, their PITI, which was $900, we were going to give them like another $2,000 on top of that. And then we were going to create a spread on the rent from the tenant buyer. So they were going to make $2,000 a month. It was almost like it was a lease purchase, but it was almost like a owner finance situation, right? So they were going to collect that $2,000, and then it was a 10-year deal, Steve. 10-year deal we agreed on. And so on or before 10 years, we were going to cash them out, and they were going to use that money because they were going to retire. They were both, I think, professors at the local college. So they were going to retire in 10 years, and they were just going to take that money and retire. So it was a great situation all around. Like, they were getting what they wanted. I was going to make can you imagine my first deal being a 10-year term? That would have been a really good payday.
Numerous hundreds of thousands of dollars deal.
Yeah, it was definitely a high 6-figure, right? But it didn't have a pool. And if you guys don't know about Palm Springs, it's like it can be average 105, 110 in the summertime. It gets super hot.
So it's a pool of AC, basically you have to have it.
Yeah, so it didn't have a pool.
Okay.
It was right there on the golf course. So it was a really nice home, but I just having a hard time trying to sell it. And this is the beginning of 2020. So this is January, February, March of 2020, right? Yeah. And so then COVID struck. Nobody I couldn't get anybody to see their house. So I had to give it back. So this tremendous deal, like you, because your first deal would have been a pretty high-end payday, right? This is a really good payday. Nope. I had to give it back. And then I didn't get my next deal until October of 20. So it was another, I think it's very similar to you. It was another like 6 months where I finally got another deal and found a buyer and got my first payday. But
did they take the contract from you? Or did you expire?
it was just like mutual. Yeah, I think because we were shooting for 120 days, so it was within that window.
What were you feeling when you had to have that final conversation, when you guys agreed that you're going to go your separate ways? What was the feeling inside you?
Like you said, it was like a punch in the gut, right? Because you're vetting these potential tenant buyers. You want to make sure you're putting the right people in the home that can afford it. they're going to treat the house nice. They're not, again, we're looking for buyers, right? We're not looking for tenant renters that are going to squat and beat up the house, right? They're going to treat it as if they were owning the home. You're vetting them, you're going through the process, you're gaining that confidence of talking to these buyers and having good conversations. And then they say, we're just going to take the house back because we're going to, and this is.
Here's the other thing, right, Russell? Like me and you, we're trying to leave our freaking careers, man. We're trying to leave our W-2s. We're trying to be like entrepreneurs. Like the amount of extra stress that we haven't even mentioned that we put on ourselves about this. Yeah, you lost this deal. There's a bunch of money attached, but that money is providing something very specific for me and you and other people in the community there who are looking to escape their W-2s, right? Maybe they hate their job. Maybe they're just dead it forever and they need to change. But the whole point, at least from day one for me, for you and other people who have been really successful, is just like, we want to be business owners. Like we can create money, we can self-sustain. We believe in ourselves to do it. So when you have these deals and you start running numbers to see what these deals can provide, like you keep on bringing your excitement level up and up, right? You start getting irrational. And that was what I did in the beginning, is I was counting money before I had it. And I was like, all I need is one more of these and I'm gone for 2 years. I cannot do a deal for 2 years. And I'm going to be awesome. And then these deals fall apart. And like all these things you're putting in your brain about this is going to provide me this. I'm going to be able to do this and that and the other. And it's like, you need to stay level headed. You need to focus on the activities that are going to produce these deals converting, not I'm going to have a Tesla and I'm going to have 17 more chains like this. You know what I mean? You're like, you got to just have the right expectations for yourself. You got to stay cool. You got to know that anything can happen. There is no such thing as a deal until it is closed, funded, and it's in your account.
Right.
So no, that's awesome, man. It's high emotion. If you can't control your emotions, which in the very beginning, you're going to have trouble. You have to go through ups and downs for you to find that level ground.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're an emotional person, you want to see fatigue faster than you can believe, because it's the highest of highs and it's the lowest of lows if you allow yourself to not be in control of having a balance. And the balance is tough, but that's why it's important to be in a community, to be able to hear about what other people have not only struggled with, what they've already done, things that they've done to be able to either monitor or make this experience more level-headed, or just surrounding yourself with people who are feeling the same things and you don't feel alone, right? And you're given tricks and tips of how to be able to build this business at a steady incline. You're not looking to go off a rocket ship. That's great if you do, but eventually you're going to have to come down. We just want that slow, steady hockey stick and just to keep on moving forward, and then being surrounded by the right people, man, that makes that journey so much easier.
Yeah. And you touched upon it. If you're trying to leave your W-2, but you got to you said, give yourself some grace. You're not going to be able to leave your W-2 right away. Now you might be really unhappy at your W-2. You're going to have to suck it up, because it's not going to be like overnight where you're going to get this deal. You're going to get a payday one and you're like, okay, I'm out of here. See ya. That's not going to happen. We're just being transparent here. That's not going to happen. So you got to put in the work. I think Chris talks about the 3 to 5 years. I'm in my 5th year, right? Unfortunately, I was able to leave my W-2 because of this. It can't happen as long as you put your nose down and grind it out, right? Because it is a grind. It's not easy, but you got to put in the work. And like you said, surround yourself with the right people. So awesome stuff, Steve. It was great seeing you again. I really enjoy it.
I enjoy seeing you, buddy.
Yeah.
You come to Boston again and you're going to call me and your wife, and you are going to have big problems.
All right. I'm going to be out there. I'm going to be in Rhode Island in June. So maybe we can hook up in June.
We will hook up in June, buddy.
And then I'll be out there in September. Boston.
All right. Well, you come down to Boston. So
Boston, match.
Oh, the town that I got the big reveal at the end of the podcast. It was Sudbury.
It either ends in Chester or Barry.
That's right, Russell.
Awesome. All right, man. It was great seeing you. We'll talk to everybody else. Take care.
All right, Rusty.
See ya.